A millionaire gives the key to his apartment to a homeless pregnant woman to shelter her from the storm. But when he returns and opens the door without warning, he is shocked by what has happened. Get ready for a journey full of nostalgia and incredible twists. Today's story is truly remarkable, with an ending that's sure to touch your heart and leave you amazed. So, stay with me until the very last moment. I hope this experience is unforgettable for you, and may God bless you and your family. Now, let's get started. New York City, 1983. Thunder cracked across the Manhattan skyline as Maxwell Pierce stood at his penthouse window, watching sheets of rain batter the glass. At 38, he had everything money could buy: the top floor of an exclusive building, a thriving real estate empire, and a reputation as one of the city's most ruthless businessmen. But on this storm-ravaged evening, something caught his eye that would change everything. 20 floors below, huddled in the building's entrance alcove, was a young woman. Even from this distance, Maxwell could see she was pregnant, desperately trying to shelter from the deluge, her thin jacket providing little protection against the wind and rain. He tried to look away. This wasn't his problem. New York was full of homeless people, and he couldn't help them all. But something about her vulnerability, about the way she protectively cradled her swollen belly, kept drawing his gaze back. "Damn it," he muttered, grabbing his umbrella and keys. The elevator ride down was quick, but with each floor, an internal battle raged. Was he being foolish? Naive? In this city, kindness was often mistaken for weakness. The lobby was empty except for George, the night doorman, who looked surprised to see Maxwell at this hour. "For everything all right, Mr. Pierce?" "Fine, George. Just checking something." Outside, the rain was even fiercer than it had appeared from above. The woman startled when Maxwell approached, pressing herself further into the corner of the alcove. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd thought, perhaps in her mid-20s, with striking green eyes that held both fear and defiance. "You can't stay here," Maxwell said, then immediately regretted his harsh tone. "I mean, it's not safe, especially in your condition." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. "I'll move along, just give me a minute until the rain lets up a bit." Her voice was educated, cultured, not what he'd expected. There was a story here, he realized, a reason why someone who clearly came from better circumstances was now sheltering in his building's doorway. Lightning illuminated the street, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The woman jumped, and in that moment of vulnerability, Maxwell made a decision that went against every cynical instinct he'd developed in his years of New York City living. "I have an empty apartment," he said, pulling out his spare key ring. "14th floor. It's furnished but unoccupied. I keep it for business associates." He removed a key and held it out. "Take it, just until the storm passes." She stared at the key, then at him, suspicion warring with desperate need on her face. "Why would you—" "Because no one should be out in this, especially not—" He gestured to her pregnant belly. "The apartment's 14B. Take the service elevator, fewer questions that way. Return the key to the doorman when you leave." Before she could respond, he pressed the key into her hand and turned away, hurrying back inside. He nodded to George as he passed. "If anyone asks, 14B is occupied by a business associate. Understood?" George, who'd been with the building for 20 years and had seen plenty, simply nodded. "Of course, Mr. Pierce." Back in his penthouse, Maxwell poured himself a scotch and tried to focus on work, but his thoughts kept drifting to the woman below. Had she taken the key? Used it? Part of him hoped she hadn't. It would prove his cynicism right about people taking advantage of kindness. 3 days passed. The key hadn't been returned to the doorman. Maxwell told himself he'd give it one more day before calling building security, but curiosity and concern finally got the better of him. That evening he took the elevator to the 14th floor. Standing before 14B, he hesitated only briefly before using his master key. The sight that greeted him stopped him dead in his tracks. Maxwell stood frozen in the doorway, his hand still gripping the key. The apartment he'd left empty and coldly furnished had been transformed, not by expensive decorations or dramatic changes, but by small touching details that spoke of someone trying to create a home from virtually nothing. The living room was immaculately clean, with magazines and newspapers arranged neatly on the coffee table. A worn quilt, clearly brought from elsewhere, was carefully draped over the back of the couch. The kitchen counter held a few basic groceries, arranged with military precision, but what truly caught his attention was the dining table. There, surrounded by stacks of papers and job applications, sat the pregnant woman he'd helped days ago. She was writing intently, her long brown hair falling forward as she worked, completely absorbed in her task. She hadn't heard him enter. As he watched, she paused to rub her temples, and he noticed the dark circles under her eyes. Beside her lay dozens of carefully written letters, each addressed to different companies and organizations. She was looking for work. The sound of his shoe scuffing the doorframe made her head snap up. Her eyes widened in fear, and she quickly stood, one hand protectively covering her belly. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, gathering the papers. "I know I should have left already. I needed a base to job hunt from. Somewhere to list as an address. I'll go right now." "Wait," Maxwell said, holding up his hand. He stepped into the apartment, taking in more details: a small bag of groceries from the corner store, a second-hand notebook filled with careful calculations and budgets. This wasn't someone taking advantage. This was someone trying desperately to rebuild their life. "Tess, what's your name?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. Sarah Mitchell." "I'm Maxwell Pierce." He gestured to the papers. "You're looking for work?" "Yes. I have a degree in accounting from Boston University. I worked for Peterson & Associates for 3 years until—" She trailed off, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. Maxwell moved closer, noting how she tensed but held her ground. The papers on the table were meticulously organized, cover letters, resumes, and job listings carefully categorized. One caught his eye: a position at a mid-sized accounting firm downtown. "Why haven't you submitted this one?" he asked, picking up the application. Sarah's cheeks flushed. "The interview clothes requirement. They expect candidates to be professionally presented. I can't—" She gestured helplessly at her worn dress. Maxwell studied her more carefully. Despite her circumstances, there was a dignity in her bearing, an intelligence in her eyes. Her handwriting was neat and precise, her letters well crafted. Everything about her spoke of someone who'd known a better life and was fighting to return to it. "Tell me what happened," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. "The real story." Sarah sank back into her chair, exhaustion evident in every movement. For a long moment she was silent, as if weighing how much to trust him. "I was engaged," she finally began. "David worked at the same firm. Everything was perfect, the wedding planned, our future laid out. Then I got pregnant." She smiled bitterly. Suddenly, the man who'd sworn to love me forever was suggesting alternatives. When I refused, well, it's amazing how quickly someone can become a stranger. She took a shaky breath. "He told the partners at the firm that I'd been falsifying documents. Of course they believed him. He was the rising star, and I was just the pregnant woman causing problems. By the time I cleared my name, my reputation was ruined. No one in Boston would hire me." Maxwell felt anger rising. He'd seen plenty of corporate betrayals in his time, but this was particularly cruel. "I came to New York to start over," Sarah continued. "I had some savings, but finding work was harder than I expected. No one wants to hire a pregnant accountant, no matter her qualifications. The savings ran out, and then—" She gestured around the apartment. "Then you found me in your doorway." "How far along are you?" Maxwell asked, noting how she kept one hand protectively on her belly. 7 months. Her voice softened. "It's a girl." Maxwell stood abruptly, pacing the room. Everything in his experience told him to end this now. Give her some money, wish her well, and send her on her way. It was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. Instead, he heard himself say, "I have a proposition for you." Sarah watched him warily. "What kind of proposition?" "My company's accounting department is understaffed. We're in the middle of several major developments, and the workload is overwhelming our current team." He turned to face her. "Or I'm offering you a job. 3 months trial period, starting immediately. If you perform well, it becomes permanent." Sarah's eyes widened. "But I'm pregnant. In 2 months, I'll need maternity leave. We have excellent maternal benefits. He smiled slightly. I may be ruthless in business, but I take care of my employees. And this apartment comes with the job. Consider it part of your compensation package. He held up a hand as she started to protest. It's not charity, it's business. I need good accountants, and your references from Boston before the incident are impressive. You need a chance to prove yourself. It's that simple. Sarah stood, her hands trembling slightly. Why are you really doing this? Maxwell considered the question. Why was he doing this? He'd built his reputation on being hard-nosed and unsentimental. Yet something about Sarah's situation, her dignity in the face of adversity, touched something he'd thought long buried. Let's just say I know what it's like to need a second chance, he said finally. Do you accept? Sarah looked around the apartment, at her carefully organized job applications, at the small signs of home she'd tried to create. Then she looked back at Maxwell, and for the first time he saw hope in her eyes. Yes, she said quietly, I accept. Good. Be at Pierce Development's main office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Ask for Linda in HR. She'll handle your paperwork. He headed for the door, then paused. And Sarah, don't worry about interview clothes. I'll have Linda take care of that too. As he rode the elevator back to his penthouse, Maxwell wondered if he'd lost his mind. He was offering a job and an apartment to a homeless pregnant woman he barely knew. It went against every business principle he'd ever followed. But something told him this decision, crazy as it seemed, was right. He just hoped he wouldn't regret it. What he didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever, in ways neither could imagine. The Pierce Development offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming Manhattan skyscraper. On her first morning, Sarah arrived early, wearing a modest navy dress that Linda from HR had kindly provided. Her heart pounded as she rode the elevator, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, the other clutching her worn leather briefcase, a remnant from better days. The accounting department was exactly as Maxwell had described, overwhelmed. Stacks of files covered every surface, and harried-looking employees rushed between desks with calculators and coffee cups. The department head, Robert Coleman, was a silver-haired man with reading glasses perched permanently on his nose. Welcome to the madhouse, he said, showing Sarah to her desk. Maxwell told me about your situation. Don't worry, your past stays in the past. What matters is what you can do now. Sarah dove into work immediately. Grateful for the chance to prove herself, her first task was reviewing a complex development project's financials, a massive undertaking that had fallen behind schedule. As she immersed herself in the numbers, everything else faded away. This was what she loved, what she was good at. Here, in the language of debits and credits, she found certainty. By lunchtime, she'd already spotted 3 significant discrepancies that had been overlooked. By day's end, she'd drafted a comprehensive report highlighting potential cost savings. When she finally looked up from her work, she realized most of her colleagues had already left. Still here, she startled at Maxwell's voice. He stood in the doorway of the accounting department, his tie loosened, jacket slung over one shoulder. The setting sun through the windows cast long shadows across the office. I wanted to finish this report, she explained, gathering her papers. There are some issues with the River Heights development that need attention. Maxwell approached her desk, picking up the report. As he read, his eyebrows rose. These calculations, you did all this today. The patterns were clear once I started looking. The contractor's been padding the materials costs by about 12%, hiding it in bulk orders, and the scheduling delays. They're systematic, designed to trigger penalty clauses that actually benefit them more than timely completion would. A slow smile spread across Maxwell's face. Robert said you were good. He understated it. He set the report down. Have dinner with me. Sarah tensed. Mr. Pierce, I don't think... To discuss the report, he added quickly. There's a diner around the corner. Nothing fancy, just business. She hesitated, then nodded. The diner was indeed nothing fancy. A classic New York establishment with neon signs and vinyl booths. Over coffee and grilled cheese sandwiches, they dove into the details of her findings. Maxwell asked sharp questions, challenging her assumptions, but nodding with approval at her detailed responses. "You know," he said finally, "when I found you in that doorway, I never imagined you'd end up saving me millions of dollars on your first day." Sarah blushed. "I was just doing my job." "No, you were doing exceptional work." He studied her for a moment. "Why accounting? Most people find it boring." "But it's not boring at all," Sarah protested. "It's like solving puzzles. Everything has to balance, has to make sense. In accounting, there's always a right answer, even if it's sometimes hard to find. Unlike life," she added softly. Maxwell's expression softened. "How are you settling into the apartment?" "It's more than I could have hoped for. Though," she hesitated, "I should start looking for something else, for after the baby comes." "Why?" "The apartment's too nice for a single mother with a newborn. The other residents will mind their own business," Maxwell said firmly. "That apartment is part of your compensation package, remember? You've more than earned it today, alone." As they left the diner, the early summer evening was warm and pleasant. Maxwell insisted on walking her to the building's entrance, though it was only a few blocks away. They talked easily about work, about the city, about everything except their unusual circumstances. At the door, Sarah turned to him. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce, not just for dinner, but for everything." "Maxwell," he corrected. "After saving my company millions, I think you can call me Maxwell." Over the next few weeks, Sarah proved herself invaluable to the accounting department. Her attention to detail and analytical skills uncovered numerous inefficiencies and potential problems. Robert Coleman became her strongest advocate, praising her work to anyone who would listen, but not everyone was as welcoming. Janet Porter, a senior accountant who'd been with the company for 15 years, viewed Sarah with obvious suspicion. The whispers started small, questions about Sarah's sudden hiring, about her condition, about her mysterious past. "It's obvious what's going on," Sarah overheard Janet telling a colleague in the break room. "The girl's pregnant, alone, and suddenly gets an apartment and a job from the boss? Draw your own conclusions." Sarah forced herself to hold her head high, to let her work speak for itself. But the comments stung, especially because they played on her own fears about how others might view Maxwell's kindness. Maxwell himself remained professionally distant during office hours, though she occasionally caught him watching her with an unreadable expression. Their paths crossed mainly in meetings, where he treated her with the same brusque efficiency he showed everyone else. But every few days, he would appear at her desk near closing time, report in hand, suggesting they discuss it over dinner at the diner. These evening discussions became a routine, though neither of them acknowledged it as such. They talked about work, about the city, about books and music. Sarah discovered that beneath Maxwell's stern exterior lay a sharp wit and surprising kindness. He, in turn, seemed to relax in her presence, revealing glimpses of a man few others saw. As her pregnancy progressed, Sarah found herself looking forward to these dinners more than she wanted to admit. Maxwell never mentioned her condition directly, but she noticed how he always chose booths that would be comfortable for her, how he made sure she ate properly, how his hand would hover near her elbow when they walked. One evening, about a month after she started work, Sarah was reviewing files late when severe cramps hit her. She tried to stand but doubled over in pain. Fear gripped her. It was too early for the baby to come. "Sarah?" Maxwell's voice seemed to come from far away. She looked up to find him kneeling beside her chair, his face tight with concern. "What's wrong?" "The baby," she gasped. "Something's wrong." Without hesitation, Maxwell scooped her up in his arms. "Hold on," he ordered, already striding toward the elevator. "I'm taking you to the hospital." "My purse," she protested weakly. "Damn your purse," he snapped, punching the elevator button with his elbow. "You're more important." The ride to the hospital was a blur. Sarah was vaguely aware of Maxwell barking orders, of being rushed into the emergency room, of doctors and nurses swarming around her. Through it all, Maxwell's hand remained firmly gripped in hers. Hours later, the crisis had passed. False labor, the doctors said, brought on by stress and overwork. The baby was fine, but Sarah needed rest. As she lay in the hospital bed, exhausted but relieved, She realized Maxwell had never left her side. "You should go home," she told him. "It's late, and you have meetings tomorrow." He shook his head, dark circles under his eyes. "The meetings can wait. You gave me quite a scare, Sarah." Something in his voice made her look at him more closely. The usual mask of cool efficiency was gone, replaced by genuine concern and something else she couldn't quite name. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to worry you." "When I saw you in pain," he stopped, running a hand through his disheveled hair, "I realized something tonight, something I've been trying not to admit." Sarah's heart began to pound, and not from any medical condition. "What?" But before Maxwell could answer, a nurse bustled in to check Sarah's vitals. The moment, whatever it had been, passed. Maxwell stood, straightening his rumpled suit. "Get some rest," he said, his professional manner back in place. "Take tomorrow off. I'll have Linda handle your workload." He paused at the door, looking back at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah to wonder what he had been about to say, and why its loss left her feeling so empty. The hospital incident changed something between Maxwell and Sarah, though neither spoke of it directly. After her mandated day of rest, Sarah returned to work to find her desk had been moved, no longer in the crowded main office, but in a quiet corner with a comfortable, ergonomic chair. A small refrigerator appeared beside it, stocked with water and healthy snacks. "Mr. Pierce's orders," Robert Coleman explained with a knowing smile. "He was quite insistent about reducing your stress levels." Despite these thoughtful gestures, Maxwell himself became more distant. The evening diner discussions stopped. When they did interact, it was strictly professional, though Sarah sometimes caught him watching her with that same unreadable expression from before. Janet Porter's whispers grew louder. "First an apartment, now special treatment at the office. I've worked here 15 years and never got my own mini-fridge." One morning, Sarah arrived to find a note on her desk requesting her presence in Maxwell's office. Her heart pounding, she took the elevator to the top floor. His secretary waved her straight in. Maxwell stood at his window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the city below. The morning sun cast his profile in sharp relief, highlighting the tension in his jaw. "Close the door, please," he said without turning. Sarah did so, her apprehension growing. "Is something wrong?" "The board is asking questions." He finally turned to face her. "About your hiring, your position, the accommodations. Janet Porter's husband plays golf with 2 of our directors." "Oh?" Sarah sank into a chair, one hand instinctively going to her now prominent belly. "I see. They're concerned about—" Maxwell's jaw tightened. "Appearances." "You mean they think we're involved?" Sarah said bluntly. "That this is some sort of arrangement?" "Yes." "What do you want me to do?" She lifted her chin. "Resign." "No." The force of his response startled them both. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of agitation. "No," he repeated more calmly. "Your work is exemplary. The River Heights project alone has saved us millions. I needed you to know what we're dealing with." Sarah stood carefully, supporting her back. "Then let me deal with it. I've handled gossip before." "Sarah." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "I don't want to make things harder for you." "You've only made things easier," she said softly. "Everything else, that's just life. I can handle it." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the air seemed to crackle with unspoken words. Then Maxwell's intercom buzzed, making them both jump. "Your 10 o'clock is here, Mr. Pierce," his secretary announced. "Thank you, Claire." He stepped back, professional distance sliding back into place. "Keep me informed if the situation becomes untenable." Sarah nodded and left, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with office politics. The following weeks brought new challenges. As her due date approached, Sarah found herself working longer hours, determined to prove her worth beyond any doubt. She reorganized the entire accounting system, implementing new procedures that streamlined operations significantly. But the whispers continued, growing more pointed. One morning, she found a nasty note in her desk drawer, suggesting she'd earned her position on her back. She crumpled it quietly, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her upset. That evening, working late as usual, she was surprised by a knock on the office door. Our delivery man stood there with a large paper bag. "Dinner delivery for Sarah Mitchell?" Inside the bag, she found her usual diner order, grilled cheese and tomato soup, along with a note in Maxwell's distinctive handwriting, "You missed dinner again. The baby needs proper nutrition." Sarah smiled, touching the note gently. It was the first personal communication they'd had in weeks. The next day, she arrived early to find Maxwell waiting at her desk, looking troubled. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "My office." In his office, he paced while she sat, anxiety building in her chest. "The board meeting yesterday," he began. "They've decided to do a complete audit of all hiring and promotions from the past year. It's allegedly routine, but it's because of me," Sarah finished. "Yes." He stopped pacing, facing her. "They're going to scrutinize everything. Your qualifications, your hiring process, your compensation package, including the apartment." Sarah felt the world tilting. The apartment had become her sanctuary, her hope for a stable future for her baby. "When?" "The audit starts next week." He hesitated. "Sarah, there's something else. The board. They've suggested it would be better if you took your maternity leave early. Paid, and of course, but they want me gone before the audit." Her voice was flat. "Yes." Sarah stood carefully, her back aching. "I see. Well, thank you for telling me. I'll start packing up my desk." "Damn it, Sarah, don't be like that." Maxwell stepped closer. "I'm trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Anger flared, hot and unexpected. "By letting them push me out, by letting them think exactly what they've suspected all along." "What do you want me to do?" he demanded. "Fight the board? Risk everything I've built?" The moment the words left his mouth, she saw regret flash across his face, but it was too late. "No," she said quietly. "I would never ask that of you, Mr. Pierce. I'll have my resignation on your desk tomorrow morning." She turned to leave, but he caught her arm. "Sarah, wait, please." "I didn't mean... Let go of me." Her voice trembled. "Please, just let go." He released her immediately, stepping back as if burned. Sarah walked out of his office, head high, refusing to let the tears fall until she was safely in the elevator. In her apartment that night, she began packing her meager belongings, trying to figure out her next move. The baby kicked vigorously, as if protesting the upheaval. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "We've started over before, we can do it again." A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Janet Porter standing there, looking uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" the older woman asked. "There's something you need to know." Sarah hesitated before stepping aside to let Janet enter. The older woman looked around the apartment, taking in the half-packed boxes and scattered belongings. "So it's true," Janet said. "You're leaving?" "Yes." Sarah remained standing, one hand protectively on her belly. "Was there something specific you wanted to tell me?" Janet sank onto the couch, suddenly looking tired. "I owe you an apology." "Several, actually. But first, you need to understand something about Maxwell Pierce." Sarah stiffened. "I don't think—" "Just listen," Janet interrupted. 15 years ago, when I started at Pierce Development, Maxwell wasn't the CEO. His father, William Pierce, ran the company, and William, well, let's just say he had a reputation for taking advantage of vulnerable female employees. Sarah slowly sat down, her curiosity overcoming her reluctance. "I was one of them," Janet continued, her voice tight. "Young, desperate for work, with a sick child at home. William offered me a position, an apartment, everything I needed, but the price—" She shook her head. Maxwell found out. He was just starting in the company then, but he confronted his father. It turned ugly. William threatened to disinherit him, but Maxwell wouldn't back down. He helped me file a complaint, supported me through the whole mess. What happened? William was forced to retire. Maxwell took over and implemented strict policies against harassment. He made sure I kept my job, my dignity. Janet met Sarah's eyes. That's why I've been so difficult. When I heard about you, about how he helped you, I thought history was repeating itself. I thought he'd become his father." Sarah felt the room spinning slightly. "But he hasn't." "No," Janet agreed. "If anything, he's been keeping his distance from you. Too much distance, maybe." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "The board meeting yesterday, Maxwell defended you strongly, said if they wanted to question his hiring decisions, they could start looking for a new CEO. Sarah's heart skipped. He what? Threatened to resign if they didn't drop the audit. I've never seen him like that, not since the days he fought his father. Janet headed for the door, then paused. "You should also know, the apartment. It was his mother's. After she left William, this is where she lived until she died. Maxwell's never let anyone use it. Until you—" After Janet left, Sarah sat in the growing darkness, her mind whirling. The baby kicked, as if urging her to action. But what action? What was the right thing to do? A knock at the door startled her again. This time it was Maxwell who stood there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Don't resign," he said before she could speak. "Please." "I heard about the board meeting," she replied softly. Janet told me." "Janet." He ran a hand through his hair. "I suppose she told you everything then?" "About your father?" "Yes." Sarah stepped back, allowing him to enter. "Why didn't you tell me?" "How could I?" He paced the small living room. "Hi, I'm giving you this apartment because my father was a predator and I'm trying to prove I'm different. It sounds insane." "Is that why you've been so distant?" "Trying to prove you're different." Maxwell stopped pacing, turning to face her. "I've been distant because every time I'm near you, I want to be closer. Because watching you work, seeing your strength, your intelligence, it terrifies me how much I've come to care about you, and I couldn't let anyone think I was taking advantage of that." Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. "So, you pushed me away instead?" "I thought I was protecting you, your reputation, your position in the company." He moved closer, his eyes intense. "But today, when the board threatened your job, I realized I'd rather lose everything else than see you hurt." "Maxwell," Sarah started, but a sharp pain cut off her words. She gasped, grabbing the back of a chair. "Sarah?" His voice was alarmed. "I think—" She looked down at the puddle forming at her feet. "I think my water just broke." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Maxwell called an ambulance, grabbed her hastily packed hospital bag, and refused to leave her side even when she shouted at him during particularly bad contractions. In the delivery room, he held her hand, letting her squeeze it until she was sure she'd broken something. When she cried that she couldn't do it, he whispered encouragement, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a girl," the doctor announced. "Emma," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Her name is Emma." The nurses cleaned and wrapped the baby, placing her in Sarah's arms. She was tiny but perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that, when they briefly opened, were a deep blue. Sarah looked up to share the moment with Maxwell, only to find tears in his eyes as well. He quickly wiped them away, but not before she saw the raw emotion there. "She's beautiful," he said softly, "like her mother." As Sarah held her daughter, exhausted but happier than she'd ever been, she realized something profound had shifted. The future she'd been so afraid of suddenly seemed full of possibility. The first weeks after Emma's birth passed in a haze of sleepless nights and new routines. Sarah was grateful for the paid maternity leave, though she found herself missing the structure of work. Maxwell had insisted she take the full 3 months, refusing to discuss her return until she'd had proper time to recover and bond with Emma. What surprised her most was Maxwell's constant, yet unobtrusive presence. He never stayed overnight, but he visited almost daily, often bringing dinner or necessary supplies. He seemed fascinated by Emma, watching her with an expression of wonder that softened his usually stern features. One evening, about 3 weeks after Emma's birth, Sarah found him in the nursery, a room he'd secretly had decorated while she was in the hospital. He stood by the crib, gently rocking Emma to sleep while humming what sounded like an old Beatles song. "You're good with her," Sarah said softly from the doorway. Maxwell looked up, slightly embarrassed at being caught in such a tender moment. She makes it easy. She's a remarkable baby. She is. Sarah moved closer, watching her daughter's peaceful face. But you don't have to keep checking on us. We're fine. I know you are. He carefully laid Emma in her crib. You're the strongest person I know, Sarah, but... He hesitated. I want to be here. If that's okay. Their eyes met in the dim nursery light, and Sarah felt her heart skip. Before she could respond, Emma stirred, breaking the moment. The next day, Janet visited, bringing a handmade baby blanket and some surprising news. The board's doing damage control, she reported, cradling Emma while Sarah made tea. After Maxwell's ultimatum, they're falling over themselves to prove they support his decisions. They've even fast-tracked a new parent-friendly workplace policy. Really? Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. Really? Janet smiled knowingly. Though I suspect it has less to do with corporate responsibility and more to do with the way Maxwell looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. Janet, just be careful, the older woman advised, suddenly serious. Not of Maxwell. He's nothing like his father. Be careful with his heart. I don't think he's ever let himself care about anyone the way he cares about you and Emma. That evening, when Maxwell made his usual visit, Sarah noticed how natural it felt to have him there. He moved around her kitchen with familiar ease, helping her prepare dinner while Emma slept. They worked in comfortable silence until Sarah finally gathered her courage. Why do you really come here every day? She asked. Maxwell stopped chopping vegetables, his back stiffening slightly. Do you want me to stop? That's not what I asked. He turned to face her, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. I come because this is the only place I feel truly at peace, because watching Emma grow, seeing you with her, it feels like home, and I've never had that before. Sarah's heart raced. What are you saying, Maxwell? He moved closer, his eyes intense. I'm saying that Emma's cry from the nursery interrupted him. Sarah started to go, but he caught her hand. Let me... He disappeared into the nursery, returning moments later with a whimpering Emma. The sight of this powerful businessman gently soothing her daughter made Sarah's chest tight with emotion. She just needed a change, he reported, settling into the couch with Emma, curled against his chest. The baby immediately quieted, her tiny hand gripping his tie. Sarah sat beside them, watching the tender scene. Janet told me about the board, she said softly, about the new policies. Ah, Maxwell shifted slightly, careful not to disturb Emma. I suppose you know about my ultimatum then. Would you really have resigned? In a heartbeat, his voice was firm. Sarah, I need you to understand something. When I found you in that doorway, I thought I was just helping someone in need. I had no idea you would become so essential to my life, both of you. Emma chose that moment to let out a contented sigh, snuggling deeper into Maxwell's chest. He smiled down at her, then looked at Sarah with such tenderness it took her breath away. I know this isn't conventional, he continued. I know there are complications, considerations, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you, for both of you, is anything less than love. The word hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes. Maxwell, she whispered. I'm scared. Of what? Of trusting this. Of letting myself believe in something this perfect. He shifted Emma to one arm, using his free hand to gently wipe away a tear that had escaped down Sarah's cheek. Then we'll take it slow, day by day, no pressure, no expectations. Just let me be here, let me love you both. Sarah looked at him, this man who had changed her life in so many ways, and felt the last of her defenses crumbling. Day by day, she agreed softly. Emma stirred between them, her tiny face scrunching up before relaxing into a smile in her sleep, looking at her daughter, then at Maxwell. Sarah realized that sometimes the most precious things in life come from the most unexpected places. As the evening deepened into night, they sat together on the couch, talking softly about everything and nothing, while Emma slept peacefully between them. It wasn't a conventional family scene, but it felt more real than anything Sarah had ever known. Winter in New York, 1984. Snow fell softly outside the apartment windows as Sarah prepared for her first day back at work. Emma, now 3 months old, watched from her baby swing, cooing softly while Maxwell warmed a bottle in the kitchen. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, checking her reflection nervously. The new suit Maxwell had insisted on buying her fit perfectly, but she still felt uncertain. "About what?" Maxwell asked, testing the bottle's temperature on his wrist with practiced ease. "About you returning to work, about Emma's new nanny, or about us?" Sarah turned to face him, taking in the domestic scene before her. Maxwell Pierce, feared business titan, stood in her kitchen in his expensive suit, feeding her daughter with complete naturalness. Over the past months, he had become such an integral part of their lives that she could hardly remember a time without him. "All of it, I suppose," she admitted. Maxwell set the bottle down and crossed to her, straightening her collar with gentle hands. "The nanny comes highly recommended and lives in the building. You're the best accountant we have, and us." He smiled softly. "That's the easiest part of all." Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully over the past months. Maxwell had kept his word about taking things day by day, never pushing, always respectful of her boundaries. He'd proven himself not just with words, but with countless small actions: midnight diaper runs, early morning feedings, the way he'd rock Emma for hours when she was colicky. The office had changed too. Under Maxwell's leadership, Pierce Development had implemented comprehensive family-friendly policies. Janet Porter now headed a committee on workplace equality, and the board had learned to keep their opinions about personal matters to themselves. "Ready?" Maxwell asked, lifting Emma from her swing. The baby immediately grabbed his tie, a favorite habit of hers. Sarah watched them together, her heart full. "Almost. There's just one thing I need to know." "What's that?" "That night in the storm, why did you really help me, the truth?" Maxwell was quiet for a moment, gently bouncing Emma while he gathered his thoughts. "I saw myself," he finally said. "Not literally, but I saw someone who needed a chance, like I needed one when I was fighting my father's legacy. And maybe," he smiled ruefully, "maybe some part of me recognized what I didn't even know I was looking for." Sarah stepped closer, straightening his tie where Emma had crumpled it. "And what was that?" "Family," he said simply. "Real family, not the cold, business-focused version I grew up with. Someone to come home to, someone to love." The word still made Sarah's heart skip, even after hearing it many times over the past months. "I think," she said carefully, "that we found what we were both looking for." Maxwell shifted Emma to one arm, using his free hand to cup Sarah's cheek. "Have dinner with me tonight. Not at the diner. Somewhere special." "What's the occasion?" His eyes twinkled. "Does there need to be one?" Later that evening, after a successful first day back at work, Sarah sat across from Maxwell at an elegant restaurant overlooking Central Park. Emma was home with the nanny, and for the first time in months they were truly alone. Maxwell seemed nervous, something she rarely saw in him. He kept touching his jacket pocket, and his usual confident demeanor was replaced by an almost boyish uncertainty. "Is everything all right?" she asked after their main course arrived. "Perfect," he said. "Everything's perfect, which is why." He took a deep breath. "Sarah, these past months have shown me what really matters in life. Success, money, power, they're nothing compared to what I feel when I'm with you and Emma." Sarah's heart began to race as Maxwell stood, then knelt beside her chair. Around them, other diners fell silent, watching. "I know this might seem fast," he continued, pulling a small box from his pocket, "but I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for you, for this, for us." He opened the box, revealing a stunning vintage diamond ring. "Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me?" Sarah looked at the man before her. This complicated, wonderful man who had given her so much more than just shelter from a storm. She thought about Emma, about the love that had grown between them all, about the future they could build together. "For yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Maxwell's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The restaurant erupted in applause as he pulled her into a kiss, their first, save for a few chaste pecks on cheeks. This kiss was different, full of promise and passion and future. When they finally parted, Maxwell pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he murmured. "Both of you so much." "We love you too," Sarah replied, her eyes shining with happy tears. Later that night, they stood in Emma's nursery, watching their daughter sleep peacefully in her crib. The ring sparkled on Sarah's finger as she reached down to adjust Emma's blanket. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the biggest miracles come from the smallest acts of kindness." Maxwell wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "It's like giving a stranger shelter from a storm. Like seeing someone for who they really are," she corrected, leaning back into his embrace and loving them for it. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in white. But inside the apartment that had once been a temporary shelter and was now a home, a family that fate had brought together stood wrapped in love's warmest embrace. Some might call it a fairy tale, but Sarah knew better. It wasn't magic that had brought them together, but simple human kindness. And it wasn't fate that had kept them together, but choice, the daily choice to love, to trust, to believe in each other. As Maxwell led her from the nursery to their bedroom, Sarah smiled, remembering that desperate night in the rain. She'd been looking for shelter, but she'd found so much more. She'd found home. Thank you for watching today's story. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to relive the magic of the 80s every day with our heartfelt stories. May God bless you and your family, and don't forget to click on the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another totally rad story you won't want to miss. See you in the next video, and stay awesome.